Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Statutory Planning Committee meeting of the 10th of September 2025. Apologies for the delay in starting the meeting. We did have some live streaming issues, so we've had technical issues to work through this morning. The meeting is now being live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing via the Commission's website or YouTube. Committee members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them, as well as taking notes through the meeting to assist with deliberations. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present. In relation to apologies and leave of absence, we do not have any one on leave today. All members are attending and we welcome Commissioner Adair via Zoom today. Members, are there any requests for leave of absence? Thank you very much. Disclosures of interest, we do have some to work through today. In relation to item 3.4, the development application for the proposed public jetty at Port Kennedy, Commissioner Adair has declared a perceived impartiality interest in that Commissioner Adair has advised that a board member of the developer company is also a member of a board that Commissioner sits on and has requested to remain in the meeting. I'm happy to treat that as an impartiality interest. Members, is there any dissent to that? Happy, thank you very much. On the same item, Commissioner Lakey has advised that he has a personal friendship with the board member of the development company and has declared an actual impartiality interest. And Commissioner Lakey, understand that you'll be leaving the meeting on this item. In relation to item 3.5, the standard structure plan at Wandie North, we have Member Harmon declaring a direct pecuniary interest in that Member Harmon employed by Statutory Property Group, who is listed as a landowner for the item. I understand you're stepping out on that one, Member Harmon. And on the standard structure plan for Golden Gateway, Commissioner Brooks has declared a direct pecuniary interest in that Commissioner Brooks has advised that Herb Aqua, her employer, have prepared the local water management plan for the site and is expected to be re-engaged to undertake revisions in the future. So on that basis, I understand you're stepping out of this item. Thanks, Commissioner Brooks. And on that same item, Member Moore has declared a perceived impartiality interest in that this structure plan includes the Ascot Kilns, which is a state-listed heritage place, and the Heritage Council has discussed the care and management of the Ascot Kilns. I do believe that is a perceived impartiality interest and happy for Member Moore to remain. Is there any dissent to that? Thank you very much. Members, are there any other declarations? Thank you. And Member, are there any disclosures of representation to declare? No, okay, thank you very much. We'll then move on to consideration of due consideration. Can all members please indicate that they have received the agenda ahead of today's meeting? Thank you very much. And just noting that there has been some additional information provided to members arising from questions asked upon release of the agenda. Confirmation of minutes for the Wednesday 13th of August meeting. Members, are there any questions or issues to raise in relation to the minutes? And I then call for a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes. Moved by Commissioner Herron and seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Is there any dissent? Thank you very much. They are carried. That now takes us to deputations and presentations, and I'll hand over to Sam. Thanks, Sam.
Good morning, everyone that's present to make a deputation to this Statutory Planning Committee this morning, either in person or via Zoom. You will be invited to join the table or promoted to a panellist via Zoom to deliver your deputation this morning. You have been advised of your allocated time, which will be managed by a timer, which will appear on the screen, which will count down that time. If you do have a PowerPoint presentation this morning, this will be displayed on the screen throughout your deputation, and you're requested to advise as you wish to advance the slides. Moving to the first deputation on the agenda this morning on item 3.1 on the agenda, which is the Part 11B development application for the proposed program stops at Scott. We're welcoming Daniela Muja via Zoom. Good morning, Daniela.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Statutory Planning Committee. My name is Daniela Merger from Urbanista Town Planning, and today we are here on behalf of the landowner and in support of the DPLH's recommendation for approval. The proposed development in front of you today is for a flagship Mazda dealership to cater for the Eastern Corridor of Perth. The development will transform a long vacant site into a high-quality commercial development, which includes a two-storey showroom, workshop, vehicle detailing facilities, car wash, extensive landscaping across the site, and over 70 new jobs across sales, mechanical, and administrative roles. In accordance with the City of Swan's LPS 17, the site is zoned special use with a 21 numbering. The permitted and discretionary uses in this zone represent a diverse collection of land uses, including lunch bar, consulting rooms, fast food outlets, medical centres, motor vehicle wash, restaurants, shop, recreation facilities, and service station, without one clear or consistent land use category. The proposal for motor vehicle sales and workshop is not listed under Special Use 21 and is therefore a prohibited use. Today, we are seeking special discretion from the Commission under Clause 171R1B of the Planning and Development Act 2005, as the city's scheme was first gazetted in 2008 and therefore well exceeds the 5-year review period under the Act. In terms of the appropriateness of the proposed land use and whether the Commission should exercise their discretion today, we submit that the proposed motor vehicle sales and workshop is comparable in scale, intensity, and design quality to other commercial developments permitted under Special Use 21 and along Morrison Road. The proposed development will generate significantly less traffic than the previously approved Aldi supermarket. It will incorporate high-quality landscaping and screening to improve the visual amenity and complement rather than compete with the nearby neighbourhood centre approximately 500 metres away from the site. The proposal has undergone 2 independent design reviews by the government architect, resulting in improved landscaping, facade treatments and sustainability outcomes. And a traffic impact assessment prepared for the proposed development confirms it will generate less than half of the traffic of the previously approved Aldi supermarket, with access restricted to Grey Drive only. In summary, the proposal delivers significant economic design and amenity benefits. It complements the nearby neighbourhood centre and aligns with state planning objectives and addresses all technical matters through recommended conditions. We respectfully ask the committee to support the department's recommendation for approval so this prominent site can finally be developed to a high standard. Thank you for your consideration.
Daniela, it's Emma Cole, Chair, speaking now. Thank you very much for your deputation this morning. I will see if the members have any questions for you now. Yes, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you. Daniela, the first question relates to this specific site, and if you could provide some context in terms of the site selection process, in terms of why this site was identified for this particular use.
Yeah, not a problem. So Mazda Australia approached our client to look at introducing a dealership in this sort of section, this neck of the woods of Perth. Seems to sort of be lacking in this area. But it was essentially up to them to go find the site. We went site hunting, and as you may be aware, in that precinct or in that sort of Midland, Midvale area, there is the type of sites available are either too small, they're fragmented ownership and a lot of strata units, especially on Great Eastern Highway. And then there's sort of the Development WA area, which is flagged for much greater intensity development. This site was available. Audi made the decision to sell the site because of the neighbourhood centre opening up just up the road, and there's a Woolworths there. So this was available. We met with the City of Swan to discuss the proposal. They were, from the planning department, they were supportive of the proposal. And yeah, so we proceeded with the clients proceeded with the purchase. But basically for the dealership, they do need a specific land area. It probably is bigger than what they would normally go for, but I guess that enables additional landscaping and, you know, allows the site to breathe a little bit more than what perhaps you would see on an ordinary, you know, a standard motor vehicle sales where there's just a lot of cars out there, and yeah, there's very limited landscaping opportunities. In this case, we're able to do that.
Thank you. Further to that, through the chair, you talked about obviously the complementing the local centre. I mean, obviously, a car yard is not normally associated with a local centre, and you did touch on Great Eastern Highway. Like normally, a bulky goods precinct would be in a different context. How do you see that being managed from a local aesthetic and land use perspective?
Yeah, look, with the neighbourhood centre, I mean, if anything, that probably doesn't fit in with the Morrison Road streetscape. That's sort of on the other side of Road Highway, there is numerous sort of fast food outlets. I think there's about 4 service stations within like a few hundred metres. It's kind of that service highway commercial type land uses, and then there's, you know, the neighbourhood centre, so which, you know, offers the Woolworths and specialty stores. So I feel like that is kind of more out of place along Morrison Road than the proposed land uses and the proposed development and amongst the other land uses. But I think in terms of complementing each other, well, if you're getting people coming to one, then they're potentially likely to go to another.
And further to that, in relation to the approval, so should the approval be issued, obviously the base zoning remains the same. Therefore, obviously it would be operating. So if there were to be changes, etc., to your tenancy, that might trigger other requirements which couldn't be dealt with the local government process. Are you comfortable and confident that the proposal is sufficiently tied down that you wouldn't come across that conflict?
Well, I guess, yeah, I'm comfortable that we have, I guess, catered for what the clients want in the proposal, and you know, ideally they construct it exactly in accordance with the plans. I mean, as you know, sometimes there is amendments happen prior to, you know, during, I guess, between the approval and the building permit process for whatever reason. But I would have thought if there was a underlying approval, potentially the city could deal with amendments based on it being a non-conforming use. But I mean, I would have to look into that further, to be honest. Right?
Sorry, through the chair. And I'm thinking more so about a land use perspective. One of the things I have been looking at is whether the approval needs to be adjusted such that the land use approval has a little bit more breadth in terms of, so for instance, if there was to be caravans or boats to be part of the sales, that could be incorporated under the existing approval. Would you see that as being beneficial, or would you rather keeping it purely at car sales?
Okay, let me just... I'd have to actually look, I mean, I have to look at the exact definition now because most local planning schemes sort of incorporate caravans into that same definition. I'm not sure whether there would be a separate definition for caravan sales as rather than motor vehicle sales. I'd have to look into that.
Sure.
Based on the city's scheme. But
that's fine. Sorry,
I think at this point, look, Mazda know what they want, and they have no intention of you know, there's no caravans for sale here. So yeah.
Sure. And finally, through the chair, if I could just clarify, you did request some amendments to conditions. Did you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, I did through that when the conditions were sort of sent to us in draft form. That was condition 3B. Sorry, do you have the agenda? It's just on that was in relation to the finishes and the external finishes of the building. So our proposed and the heat. Sorry, I'm just. getting that exact wording of the condition. Okay, so condition 3B, the review of the colour selection for the buildings to reduce their impact on heat load, noting the extensive use of dark shades for building facades and roofs within the proposal. I do have concerns with that condition. It seems very grey in terms of trying to meet that. The proposal includes, or the plans include an extensive list of colours and materials on the elevation plans, and that was based on sort of Mazda's specifications as well. So that's what's proposed, and the applicant or the client has no intentions of changing that colour scheme. So that's, I guess, part A, but part B is that in trying to address that condition, it seems it's kind of in a grey space. Like I'd have concerns about trying to address that.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Thanks, Daniela. We'll ask some questions on that when we come to the item. Commissioner Adair.
Thank you, Chair. Daniela, you've just actually said that that you believe that the application as proposed is not complementary to the local area. One of the criteria that we look at with an 11B application is whether the application raises issues of state or regional importance and is in the public interest. Can you walk us through how you believe this application is in state or regional importance and in the public interest?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Adair. Through the chair, my understanding of the section 171R is that one of the provisions that you can meet in order to exercise, for the commission to exercise their discretion, is whether it is in the public interest or it has state or regional significance. But I understand that that's an or. In this case, I don't think that this is in the public interest or state or regional significance. I'm going to be frank. However, I do believe that it does meet 171R1B, which is, that the scheme is outdated in that it hasn't been reviewed since, that the current scheme was gazetted in 2008. I also believe that it also could fall under C, which is that it's of a minor nature. And we say that because the land uses that are permitted or discretionary under the special use zone are really just a mixed bag of land uses that would, ordinarily you would see on a sort of like highway commercial type setting. So if a service station and a car wash can go on this site as a discretionary land use, I don't see there being any difference, I suppose, in a motor vehicle sales, and that's why we say it's a minor nature. I know the report, the agenda report, talks to that, and I think the DPLH has said that they don't agree that Part C should be considered because the Commission has never used Part Cs, but I don't think that that's a reason to not consider the proposal under C, just because it's never been used before.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Daniela. I think that's made at the end there. Any further questions for Daniela? All right, thank you very much for your deputation today.
Thank you.
The next deputation this morning is on items 3.2 on the agenda, which is the Part 11B development application for the demolition of the existing multiple dwellings development and construction of multiple dwellings at 44 and 48 Road, South Perth. And we're welcoming Carol James via Zoom. Good morning, Carol. If you can see and hear us, could I ask you to unmute and turn on your video so you may participate in the meeting this morning?
Yes. Yes, there I am. Yep. You should hear me now.
Yes, we can. Welcome to the Statutory Planning Committee meeting this morning, Carol. Over to you to deliver your deputation when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. It's just a small submission, but I'm a resident here in Mill Point Road and on a large development here. But I think this development is inappropriate in that it raises serious concerns about the scale, compliance, and the long-term impacts on the South Perth Peninsula. You're probably aware that the peninsula is a narrow neck of land here. It's several hundred metres wide and at the most 2 kilometres long. And there are natural and unavoidable constraints on development. And the South Perth Council has put out a quite comprehensive activity centre plan, which seems to have been a bit abused almost in recent times. But so my concerns about this development is that the gross floor plate limit for this area is set at 40%. The development area here of this building says that it's going to be 47%, which is 17.5% above what the council has decided should be the limit for this area. It's probably likely closer to 20% above the floor plate because I imagine they are including the Water Corporation building, which they seem to be subsuming, and that's got quite a bit of land around it. But of course, most of that land would be unusable for people. Second, the height of the building. The restriction here on next door is 11 stories. The council has built in a gradual decline in the height of buildings. Currently it's 9 stories. They've made it 11 stories next door, so they're trying to allow for development. But this is proposed as 17 stories high. That is an increase of 55% on what are the current limits here. And height restrictions exist for a reason, to balance growth with amenity, livability, and the character of the peninsula. To stretch them this far undermines that balance. Thirdly, the traffic impact. Mill Point Road, if you're going north, Mill Point Road is the only arterial access after Canning Road. You've got Canning Road to come into South Perth, and then you've got Mill Point Road. Mill Point Road is narrow. We've got old trees on both sides. I don't believe it can be widened easily. Certainly there are no plans for it that I can see at the moment. There's only one other access road, that's South Perth Esplanade, which I believe council has no plans to make that into a traffic area. Already with Civic Heart, we've seen a big increase in the traffic along Mill Point Road because everything that wants to come into South Perth going north has to come via Mill Point Road. If you're coming south, you can come in at the Labouchere Road bit there.
Carol, just to let you know that you have reached your 3 minutes. So if you could just make your concluding statement, please.
Okay, taken together, this development does not sit within the planning rules and it doesn't appear to respect the practical limits of our local infrastructure. While growth is important, it should be fair, sustainable and consistent with regulations. This proposal, as it stands, risks setting a precedent that rules can be stretched well beyond their intent, leaving the community to absorb the consequences. Thank you.
Carol, thank you very much. I'm Emma Cole, Chair, speaking to you now. Thank you for your deputation. Just one thing to assure you that you did mention the gross floor plate area, just to let you know that the 46.5% calculation does not include the Water Corp site. So just for clarification, wanted to assure you of that. And I'll now open to members to see if they have any questions for you, if that's okay.
Yes.
Members, are there any questions? There are no questions, Carol, but we do appreciate you taking the time to make a deputation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next deputation this morning, also on item 3.2 on the agenda, we're welcoming Jimmy Thompson, Joel Barker, Orbar, Ben Doyle, Nathan Morton-Smith, Isabel Howe, who are all here in person this morning, and Sam Devine,
Thompson. Can I have my slides queue, please? Okay, you can go to the first slide. Okay, thanks for your time this morning. Over the past 2 years, this project has gone through a robust planning process and design process with the clients and the State Design Review Panel. We're very happy that it's been a really great environment of collaboration with all parties and stakeholders. And I think it shows that, you know, best practice is a collaborative environment where you can get the best design outcomes. Next slide, please. The architecture that we've derived for this project is deliberately referential to the peninsula itself. So the floor plates reference the way that the peninsula's form changes over time. And with buildings like this, really to define mass and sort of reduce sense of bulk and scale and to make them more elegant and desirable, we've looked to essentially contrast the massing so that you have one colour group which directly references the sandy colours of the river shores, whereas the other elements really contrast heavily and are much more shadowy, and they really talk to the river shores, the river waters themselves. Different elements of the built form and the detail of the facades, they directly reference buildings from South Perth's history. Next slide, please. So the site itself, as it's mentioned, is a 2,000 square metre lot that actually wraps around an active sewer pump station. It's almost like a missing tooth in Midpoint Road, and it's something that we've actively looked at collaborating with Water Corp to see what works we can do to beautify that and make it a better public asset. In terms of building height, Tier 1 is a 17-storey height limit. We are compliant with that. What we've sought to do is then divide that mass into two and then essentially intertwine them so that if you view this building in the round, it's dynamic in form, it's sculptural, but also it's clearly articulate in the way that it deals with its own mass. Next slide. And so these intertwined masses essentially are two elements which are expressive in form, they're lighter in colour, they integrate a series of vertical and horizontal sunscreens that define their form and break up their vertical mass. And then you have two shadowy, more recessive forms, and they have a beautiful little interplay together. And then they sit on a very sculptural podium form, which has lots of integrated planting throughout. We incorporate existing mature trees. We create enough space to allow existing verge trees to have proper root growth. It's really an integrated approach to architecture across podium and tower elements. And this is something that then had support from the State Design Review Panel because very much the built form's been considered in the round. We understand this building and the way it will sit in the short and medium term will be amongst a series of smaller buildings as this neighbourhood develops. So it's important that architecture always understands its past, current and future context in the way that you deal with built form. In terms of the planning discretion that we ask for, we are asking for 6.5% additional floor plate area. But what this needs to be taken into consideration is that we're not asking for any additional height and we're under plot ratio. So the only reason we're doing this is to be consistent with the height available, but actually try and get anywhere near the plot ratio that we could achieve. You will notice that there are elements in orange highlighted there that we've encroached into setback areas, whereas in green we've got excessive or we exceed setback areas. Those areas in orange were deliberate moves negotiated with the State Design Review Panel to move closer to the pump station site and pull away from the rear neighbours. So we believe that they're minor in nature. And we acknowledge and support the officers' reporting within the RR report in terms of maximum tower gross floor plate area, tower setbacks and building separation, and acknowledging that building separation is not within our site but within, adjacent to neighbouring buildings, which they also support. And finally, acknowledging the State Design Review Panel and their award of design excellence in the way that we approach the building as a whole and how they were able to justify our minor discretions through the achieving of design excellence. And so one of those opportunities that we really saw was to take on the Water Corp site, which is an active pump station, and really look at ways that we can integrate public art and extensive landscaping within it. It's a pretty ordinary space at the moment. It's very much a missing tooth that lets down the street. We believe that it's a really good community benefit to go and get material planting in here, work with Watercorp so it can retain an active use, but also be able to do something unique and actually integrate public art into it. And finally, just to reiterate that this is a project that on an international standard meets a very high quality across a series of criteria, whether it's 100% LHA silver standard, 90% dual and triple aspect apartments. This will be a very good building for the people who live in it and the people who live around it, and community benefit that we're offering, we believe, deserves support. Thank you.
I'm conscious of time, so we'll try to come in well under our limit. This is a proposal by an experienced developer with a proven track record of developing high quality, high amenity developments. The design's led by a highly respected award-winning architectural team and supported by a highly respected award-winning landscape architectural team. And they're making a significant contribution to the streetscape and amenity, as Jimmy's just explained. This development's entirely consistent with the local and state government ambitions for the South Perth Peninsula precinct for a vibrant, walkable, high-density, high-amenity precinct. The reason we've selected this pathway for this development is because this is a significant development and it is well above the threshold for entry into this pathway. As outlined by Jimmy and confirmed by the chair just now, if the pump station site is included in the site area, then the tower floor plate is fully compliant with LPS 7 and the application may be determined consistent with that scheme. However, if you exclude the pump station site, then there is a variation to the tower floor plate ratio, and that requires the extraordinary discretion of the Commission. Now, in that scenario, to grant approval, you are entitled to exercise that extraordinary discretion if you consider, firstly, that the variation is minor and that the development is nonetheless consistent with the general intent of the planning framework applicable to the proposal. So the officer report deals with this, and as it explains, the conflict may be considered minor if it is either lesser in size or extent or importance. And so those three criteria, it's really only one of them that's required, but to address the three, numerically, we suggest the size of the variation is minor. It equates to 46.5% of the site area compared to the deemed to apply 40%. It remains below the tower floor plate area permitted for the baseline tower height. The extent of the variation is minor in that we remain generally compliant with the boundary setbacks and compliant with the building height and plot ratio provisions. We are below the plot ratio. And the importance of the variation is as it does not have any material impact on building bulk, view corridors, overshadow. Consistency, I don't think there's any dispute that it is consistent with the objectives of this precinct and that this is going to be a positive contribution to achieving the objectives of the activity centre plan and the scheme. If there are questions about that, we can certainly go into that. So we agree with the officer recommendation that the proposal satisfies the requirements of 171R1C and that the exercise of discretion is appropriate to approve this development. Now, to achieve the Tier 1 17-storey height limit, we also have to achieve design excellence and deliver a public benefit. We've been through 3 design reviews and the SDRP has confirmed its view, that we have achieved design excellence in their opinion. And with regard to public benefit, Blackburn is going to carry out landscaping improvement works on that Water Corporation site as a public asset that currently lights the street. And we think there's going to be a significant improvement as a result of this development. And it's one that is not required as part of this application. It is one that's being delivered as a public benefit, with the balance then to be made up as a cash contribution. So that being the case, we've got the full support of the SDAU, we've got the support of the SDRP, we've got an officer report that is comprehensive, and we would say this is exactly the sort of development this framework is intended to facilitate. We've requested a few changes to the conditions. They're just minor, I hope, and we'd be happy to discuss those, but I won't take up our time now to take you through those. No.
Hi everyone, appreciate we probably talk a little bit more time here. My name is Nathan. I want to provide a very brief perspective from the applicant in preparing this application, having it assessed. Appreciate we're just about to run out of time. I just wanted to make the point that it was important for us to, I guess, reference the city of South Perth Activity Centre plan as a starting point. We think that it provides a good framework for what's acceptable on this site and the surrounding areas, and provided clarity to us as we went through the acquisition phase and the design development phase that followed from there. We believe we've achieved an excellent outcome here, and further to Jimmy and both Ben's points earlier, we've achieved an outcome that aligns with the local planning framework and the R codes. We're not seeking any additional height here, or minor discretion.
We have to call you to time, and I think some of that commentary has already been received by the SPC, but we will have questions as well. So
sure.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Members are now open to you for questions. Yes, Member Moore.
I just have 2 questions, and I suppose probably Ben, you can answer them. It's just, Ben, you just said that gross floor plate area would be below the area for the baseline height. Did you mean in the 11 stories?
50% is the tower floor plate of it.
So that's how what changes. Okay. And the second question is, if you've got that extra going from 40 to 46, I note that the City of South Perth has concerns about the fact that 10%, the provision of 10% of single bedroom units in lieu of the minimum 20%. Can you just give me some feedback on that?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to speak to that. I mean, look, not trying to tell you something you already know, although obviously every building can't be designed for everyone. I think in this context, we've designed a building where 1-bedroom apartments will be selling upward of $1 to $1.1 million. So we understand through our history in the market and the projects that we have available at the moment, the buyer depth, although the buyer depth at that price for a 1-bedroom isn't necessarily there beyond the allowance that we've made in this project. We have done what we can to, I suppose, support dwelling diversity through here by the inclusion of 1-bedroom apartments and the inclusion of twin key apartments as well as a 2-3 and penthouse.
And that came through the SGRP process in terms of trying to get greater diversity and mix, and also have something that fitted in with the Silver LHA story of the building was to actually have the studio apartments as twin keys so that you could get a carer to live in the other part of an apartment. So we're just trying to get diversity in different ways for South Perth.
Okay. And I have one final question, if it's okay with you. Just in regards to the impact on view corridors, because once again, the South Perth Activity Centre plan, it's a relatively recent document, so you're asking for significant discretion under section 171R for some variations here. So what work will be done on the view corridors given the increase? And I'm not talking about the height, I'm talking about the increase in floor plate.
Perhaps if you could bring up the slide that showed the floor plates.
I mean, obviously it's great, but it reads in a certain way, but it still will have that significant width and bulk. So the way it reads is slightly different to whether it's providing view corridors.
Process with the SGRP and with the planning officers, we tracked both existing view corridors and how they were affected by potential building footprints and approved elements. We tracked the space between buildings and what that kind of actually meant. So if we can go to a slide a bit further on, which shows the footprints of the building. Yeah. And I guess really as well that 6.5% isn't all attributed to one boundary or another. It's balanced over the entire site, especially in that kind of east-west direction, and most of those view corridors adjacent or parallel to that. So the process that we went through saw that we believe the officers supported that there was minor impacts on view corridors.
So the view corridors are essentially maintained by the side setbacks, which we are compliant with and in fact exceed. The tower floor plate could be reduced by essentially the depth of the building, which would have no material impact on the.
So you say that if you reduce the floor plate, you're saying that wouldn't necessarily impact the site setbacks. Is that what you're...
Thank you, members. Mr. Heron.
Thank you. If we could keep that slide up, please, because it did relate to one of the items. Because obviously, the pump station intrusion is quite clear and straightforward. Can you just talk to the one in the top left-hand corner and the rationale in terms of that particular intrusion, why that would not have any substantive impact?
Well, really, it relates to the adjacent neighbour and the way that their site is set up. Obviously, that's a notch out of our own site, but really there's driveway access along, and there's the sewer line along that point as well. So there's really no habitable dwellings, and even in the future within those setbacks that will be impinged by
that rear corner there is essentially an anomaly that relates to the existing sewer line. And in fact, if you've got an aerial photograph, the behind our site, there's an empty area which is just lunch storage, and then an enclosed garage with no openings. So the impact of that variation is the result of the anomalous lot boundary. The impact is on a garage for the multi-dwelling.
Sure. No, I'm just trying to bear in mind future form, etc. But that makes perfect sense. Further to that, if I may, through the chair, if I could also ask, can you talk to, I mean, obviously in terms of the community benefit being a substantive component and a clear point of conflict between perhaps the city and the current proposal, the pump station works, let's call it, is obviously of, I would suggest, mutual benefit. It's obviously going to be of benefit to the residents in this particular facility as well. I think you'd want to look on something. But can you go to a bit more detail about what the nature of the works are and the extent to which that's been agreed to with Watercorp? And secondly, there is going to be a cash component, as I understand, and whether that was negotiated or how that was calculated.
Sure.
Go to the last slide.
Yeah, so I can touch on what we've discussed with Watercorp to date, which is embedded in these documents, is essentially working with them to come up with a water-wise planting strategy, and also implementing some significant trees to sort of break that volume between the podium, the buildings, down to the pump station. So there's that aspect of it, along with upgrading the paved surfaces and everything like that, and just, I guess, contributing to the street a lot more in terms of beautification and benefit in terms of outlook and reducing island effect, urban heat island effect, etc. And then we had
but in terms of like their engagement with it, they did sign this application, and there's ongoing discussions with us being able to wrap the actual pump house itself with a public art piece by Ian Strange. So there's a significant piece that's going in there. Some of that is ongoing because there's operational requirements around it, but they understand the intent. They've signed on based on that intent and everything else that's going in. And just adding to some of those different elements within the community benefit, I think that surplus landscaping is a major element. Being able to provide, going over and above, and I recognise that this is within the building itself, but having 100% LHA silver gives people in the area good options for downsizing, not projects that are required to do 20%. I believe you can have community benefit within your building just by what the provision of the apartments that you're providing.
Sorry, I just quickly wanted to add on the landscaping component that has been agreed with Watercorp by an executed licence agreement, so that portion is resolved. It's just the public art component that's confirmed.
And so, sorry, just to clarify, and with the public art component, will the city be party to that process, or how is that going to be managed?
That'll be through the standard public art process, is getting approval for the concept, but we have, because understandably, Watercorp were very interested in maintaining the functionality of their asset. And so there's been extensive discussion and negotiation around what sort of treatments would be acceptable for Water Corp. We've now got to that point where that is all agreed and they've signed off on the application on that basis. And yes, as part of the conditions of approval, there'll be a requirement for public art, and that will be done as part of that. In terms of the public benefit, I mean, if you look at aerial photos, that pump station site has existed in that state for about 70 years. You look on Google Street View, there's a shopping trolley.
Fully understand. It's just, I just wanted to make sure that that had been.
So there is a benefit, we would say.
Talk about the cash.
The cash contribution. Well, so there's a value that we're required to contribute. Our intention is that the upgrade works on the pump station site will be credited to that value, and any shortfall will be made up as a cash contribution in accordance with the framework.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, I think for the public benefit, because it has been a bit contentious with the City of South Perth, can you talk through the ongoing management and maintenance arrangements for the Water Corp site to maintain the landscape?
There'll be a condition of approval requiring it to be maintained, and there is a licence agreement with access to the site for the purpose of maintaining that landscape.
Okay. Member Harmon, sorry, Member Franklin, go ahead.
Yes, through the chair. I was just wanting to find out, I know the Water Corporation are doing a Splash of Colour initiative. How does this differ from that initiative? Just trying to see, I believe that's a public art initiative for Water Corp assets. So I was just wanting to see how that relates.
It's their own public art representatives within their organisation. Their Splash of Colour, as I understand it, is very much it's a applied paint finished. You know, it's street artist essential works. This, what we're proposing, is over $500,000 major international artist taking over this pump station. So Ian Strange is probably the best known of West Australian contemporary artists around the world, and we've gone through a process with him. So it's a very different type of piece of public art than what Water Corp typically do on their own assets.
Okay, members, are there any further questions for the applicant team? Thank you very much for your deputation today.
Which is the development application in Murdoch, and we're welcoming via Zoom.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, thank you. Over to you when you're ready.
Thanks very much. Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Jordan Busher, Principal Town Planner with Resolve Group, and I'm speaking today in favour and behalf of the project team for the Western Car Park proposed at the Fiona Stanley Hospital Precinct. The project represents an important step in the broader delivery of the new Women's and Babies Hospital. The Western Car Park is a 7-storey staff facility providing 1,503 bays. It will replace the existing at-grade parking, both on the subject site and to the east. In other words, this development is an enabling infrastructure. It ensures that the staff at Fiona Stanley Hospital, now and in the future, the Women's and Babies Hospital, have reliable, safe and convenient access to parking while the precinct continues to expand. The application has gone through a thorough assessment process. It's been reviewed twice by the government architect of WA, who provided really constructive feedback that has informed the design refinements. It's also been considered by the City of Melville, both informally through our own separate engagement and formally via the DPLH's application referral process, who confirmed that the proposal is consistent with their local planning framework and supported approval subject to the conditions that you would have seen today. Public consultation was also undertaken by the DPLH advertising process, and the matters raised during that process have been captured and are addressed through conditions. The department's report before you today is clear in its conclusions. The proposal is consistent with the MRS being reserved for public purposes hospital. It aligns with the Murdoch Specialised Activity Centre structure plan and represents a high quality architectural and design outcomes consistent with SPP 7.0. The height and scale of 7 stories are considered appropriate within this location, given the both existing development and, of course, the anticipated future growth in the area under the structure plan. Just conscious of time. Timing is also an important consideration for the project. The Western Car Park is scheduled to be operational by mid-2027, which aligns with the staging of the Women's and Babies Hospital. This ensures that the continuity of staff parking during construction and no gap in provision as the existing car bays will be displaced. Interim off-site parking arrangements are already established for the construction period and detailed within our construction management plan, so that patient and visitor access to Fiona Stanley Hospital remains unaffected by our project. To conclude, Chair and committee members, the Western Car Park is an essential, important piece of enabling infrastructure. It's consistent with the planning framework. It's been robustly assessed, supported by the City of Melville and government architects, and is subject to conditions which we are supportive of that will guarantee high quality outcomes in design, landscaping, amenity and safety. Finally, importantly, it allows the Women's and Babies Hospital to proceed with confidence while safeguarding the day-to-day operations of Fiona Stanley Hospital, which is fundamentally important for us. On behalf of the project team, we respectfully request your support for the department's favourable recommendation of approval subject to the conditions. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Jordan. Emma Cole, Chair, speaking to you now. I appreciate your deputation today. I will now see if members have any questions for you.
Thanks, Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you. I'm just, obviously, Jordan, many of the elements of this building are fixed for obvious reasons. A key element is around the landscape in terms of, I suppose, softening the edges. If I could just get you to speak to the process you went through around resolving the landscape versus, I suppose this is about substance versus how pretty it is from a shading and heat island effect. And the second component is whether any consideration has been put into the design process for potential future I suppose, reworking. That is, if parking demand were to reduce, is the building design such that it could be adapted over time?
With regards to your first query, look, we were constrained by the actual site itself. Obviously, given it's an existing car parking site, there was pretty little landscaping in terms of retention value. This is an item that we did discuss a number of times throughout our engagement with both the City of Melville and GAWA. We have provided a landscaping plan which does talk to particularly softening the side, the south, east and northern elements. Given our quite tight setbacks, we can appreciate it has been a pretty difficult task. But something we're committed to refining throughout that landscaping plan, which you'll see is conditioned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Any further questions? Thank you. We appreciate your deputation today.
Thanks very much.
The next deputation on the agenda this morning relating to items 3.4, the development application for proposed public jetty at Port Kennedy, has been withdrawn from the City of Rockingham. So we will move to the next deputation also on item 3.4, and we're welcoming Rain Dial and Greg Rowe, if you'd like to join us at the table.
Good morning, committee members. Rain Dial from Place Development, representing the landowner, WA PGR. We're generally supportive of the officer's recommendation before you today, subject to a few minor amendments to the conditions, which Greg will cover shortly. The proposed jetty itself is a critical component of the established project vision, important community and public asset. We recognise that today's decision is a planning approval only and that there's further approvals required before construction can commence. These approvals include a native vegetation clearing permit, which has been lodged, the DAS approval from DBCA, which has been lodged, and various licences from DBCA and Department of Transport, which will be lodged following DA. Granting planning approval today will allow us to move to detailed design and continue working with the state agencies to resolve the ultimate end manager of the jetty, of which those discussions are ongoing. WABGR are committed and ready to commence construction upon receipt of all approvals, and we therefore welcome the committee's support of the recommendation before you today. I'll hand over to Greg to speak to the conditions of approval.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Chair, I understand in regard to condition 3 that you may have already received and committee received some altered recommendation from the department. Our request was for that condition to be deleted. If that is the recommendation in front of you now in regard to condition 3, we don't propose to take any more time of the committee unless Chair or the committee has any questions on our request to delete.
The recommendation from the officers has been to remove condition 3, so we do have a new recommendation before us.
Thank you, Chair, and we are content with that and would ask that the committee adopt that change. Otherwise, the recommendation to approve the application is supported by the applicant, as you have heard from Mr. Dial. So the only observations we would like to make and ask for some changes are in regard to conditions 4, 5 and 6 on the basis that those conditions, in our view at least, the way they are worded, abrogate the responsibility of dealing with that condition away from the Commission, and we don't believe that's appropriate. The applicant in no way resiles from the notion of being required to carry out those management plans or additional reports that are referenced in those 3 conditions. However, the way the condition is worded is the issue for the applicant, in that the specification that is to be created and determined for those conditions is to the satisfaction of the city. And that is not the Commission's normal practice. We acknowledge that the conditions go on to say that the approval of those reports is to the satisfaction of the Commission, which is standard practice when the Commission issues a planning approval. However, the notion of determining a specification, which if we did not meet it by a third party and then ask the Commission to clear the condition, we say it might actually be beyond the ability of the Commission to clear such a condition. So, Chair, with that said, we are asking that the conditions 4, 5 and 6 be reworded, more along the lines that are traditional for the Commission, in that acknowledging that the plans and the reports are required, that they be prepared by a suitably qualified professional and submitted to the satisfaction of the West Australian Planning Commission based on advice received from the relevant authorities. Which includes, as you'll see from those conditions, the city, of course, which we don't have any trouble with as an advisory body, the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation, Attraction, Department of Transport, and as relevant to each of those questions. It's the wording that concerns us, Chair. Otherwise, we endorse the recommendation. We thank the department and we ask that the application for planning approval be granted with those changes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your deputation. We will discuss your request when we come to the item. Members, are there any other questions for the deputies today? There are none, but thank you for raising. We will discuss.
Thank you.
The next deputation this morning is on item 3.5 on the agenda, which is the standard structure plan for the Wandie North structure plan 2010, and we're welcoming Rebecca Thompson and Isabella Scarfoni to the table. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm speaking on behalf, I'm Rebecca, this is Bella, sorry. I'm speaking on behalf of the proponents and developers of the Honeywood and Whistling Grove estates, which sit within the Lundy North Structure Plan area, Hadley Property Group and Terra Novus. If you go to the next slide, please. We're seeking approval of the proposed amendment to the structure plan and request that the officer's recommendation be upheld, which is for approval subject to modifications. We confirm we're fully supportive of the proposed schedule of modifications, so we ask that that be upheld. As demonstrated in the officer's report, we understand there's no dispute that the LSP shouldn't be approved, but we do acknowledge that there may have been some queries raised along the way in relation to the vegetation on site. So we're just going to focus on that today. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is the proposal. Happy to answer any questions in relation to the layout as we move forward. But if we go to the next slide. So majority of the amendment area has already been cleared as part of previous approvals and the existing market garden on site. There's about 2,600 square metres of vegetation remaining. This is mapped primarily as Banksia woodland. The quality of the vegetation varies across the site and it has degraded over time. The environmental assessment that was undertaken when we were going through the rezoning process concluded that this vegetation is not of a significant for retention and is not sized appropriately to be a viable habitat. This is also demonstrated, so the Commonwealth legislation does not require retention of this vegetation, which talks to a minimum of 0.5 hectares to warrant retention under that protection under that legislation, and we obviously are half that size. Also, DBCA, through their referral response, did not require retention of this vegetation. They only asked that it be considered for retention. That response was also based on a much larger area of vegetation, which has been since cleared as part of previous approval, so somewhat redundant. We also previously have received APBC approval for the clearing. That aside, we're seeking to retain the largest and most significant tree on site, as well as the existing birch trees. If we could please go to the next slide. I'll try and move through quickly. So as you can see, we've across the whole development, we've achieved 40% of the site is provided as green space, which is about 49.3 hectares. 10.36 of this is primary foraging habitat Banksia woodland, and a 15.8 hectares additional secondary roosting habitat. And then the next two plans sort of identify the areas of Banksia retained and revegetation areas. And in addition to those areas, there's been a significant amount of vegetation achieved and high quality vegetation through the public open space and streetscapes. I understand we're out of time. The next two slides, we're just going to talk to the engineering constraints on the site in terms of retaining that vegetation and things like that, so we can talk to that if there are any questions in that regard. But
thank you very much, Rebecca and Isabella. Thanks very much for talking to the tree retention issue. That's obviously an issue that the report highlights, and there was, you can see from the officers that they really grappled with the option of seeking the entirety of the vegetation to be retained as opposed to identifying trees. Like, you've identified that you're keeping verge trees, which I think we have to acknowledge they are verge trees. But in relation to the trees within that area, you've identified the one tree. Was there consideration of other mature trees within that area?
We did look at, so there are there were three mapped significant trees in that area. One which was cleared as part of previous approvals, one which is dead, so it's going to have to be removed from a safety perspective. And then there's the one that we're looking to retain. There was also another large tree within the site that the city identified that they would like to keep. We did have a look at a few different design layouts to try and retain that one, but just where it sits within the site from an engineering perspective and the earthworks and the retaining, and we're going to need to sort of have a probably about 1 metre cut to fill across that site because of the fixed levels of Lion Road and then Harts Way. It just wasn't going to be possible from an engineering perspective. So that's sort of where we landed on. We were able to keep that one up the top because of the levels, and then it would step down from there. So
would you say you've given this a very comprehensive review in terms of what's possible? Yeah. Okay, thank you, appreciate that. And thank you for outlining the broader context within the structure plan. Members, are there any other questions? Commissioner Heron?
Thank you. And this is to the retained tree. Can you clarify, so the species it is and the extent of works, the extent of confidence that of survival? I know nothing can be guaranteed, but in your assessment, you feel that the level of disturbance, etc., is unlikely to result in the tree basically becoming more of a less aesthetic, let's call it.
No, so yeah, we've had a look at it from an engineering perspective and where it sits in the site, and it's adjacent to a proposed large lot. It's also sitting, we're proposing it within a road reserve, but a widened road reserve sort of towards the end of the cul-de-sac. So we're confident we've given it sufficient area around that tree to help its viability, and then the levels sort of step back from behind that tree, so the area around it, even the levels are going to be largely undisturbed.
And what sort of tree is it?
It's a eucalypt.
Okay, so because banks will die anyway. With the larger lots, if you could also clarify how that is going to be managed. Obviously, the R30 base density will apply. Those lots in the north, in particular, are quite large. And if you could just talk to how that will be managed from a development perspective.
So we intend that there will be a requirement for a local development plan over those lots, which will talk to increase setbacks to manage the interface with Lion Road, vehicle turnaround areas, because we've got issues with traffic management along Lion Road with volumes. In terms of driveway locations and things like that, so we're not impacting those existing trees on site. I understand obviously they are zoned R30 and the sizing of them might allow for future development or future subdivision. That is definitely not our intent, and we would be happy to include some kind of provisions in the local development plan that would prevent that.
Okay, so the local development plan is really going to be the vehicle. I just wanted to make sure that there is clarity around the need for that additional separation and traffic management to Lion Road. So that's clearly underway. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you for your deputation.
You're right here.
The deputation this morning is on 3 points on the agenda, which is the Standard Structure Plan, Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan, and we're welcoming Benjamin Howling and Chantel Gilbert from the City of Belmont via Zoom.
Thank you, Chair and members. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning, Benjamin. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So, members, you've received our written deputation, and I'd like to now just cover off 3 key aspects of that deputation relating to public open space, the kiln site, and additional building height criteria. So, in terms of public open space, the council endorsed structure plan requires 10% public open space on the kiln site to allow the community to engage with its state heritage listed structures. The Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage proposes replacing this with a green link, which is a vague request, does not clarify the extent of public open space. And so we recommend that the 10% requirement be retained as per Council's resolution. In terms of the future planning of the kiln site, the draft structure plan designates the kiln site as requiring a local development plan. A memorandum of understanding between the City and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage confirmed that DPLH would prepare the LDP, which was subsequently drafted. This represents a substantial body of work that could now be reviewed and advanced by DPLH, particularly given the greater certainty surrounding Golden Gateway. The recommended modifications propose removing the LDB requirement, applying a density code and an 8-storey height limit, and referencing detailed built form controls, albeit that guidance on these controls has not been provided. The officer's report suggests these could be advertised through a scheme amendment. However, if included in the structure plan, they would not also sit within the scheme. Community input would therefore only occur if the SPC directs the City to re-advertise the structure plan, which is not part of the current recommendation. And so it's appropriate for the SPC to either support a local development plan for the kiln site to ensure detailed planning with community involvement, or provide guidance on appropriate built form controls for the kiln site, require that these be included within the structure plan, and direct re-advertising so the community and council can comment. For the additional building height criteria and sustainability, the structure plan proposes heights of 10 and 15 stories, with up to 5 additional stories for delivering specific sustainability and open space measures, including publicly accessible private open space, double glazing, tree planting, solar panels, and EV charging. These controls are measurable, viable, and landowners support them. The recommended modifications remove these measurable requirements, replacing them with general references to exceeding a design principle and delivering a community benefit. While a separate modification proposes a sustainability section, it does not specify acceptable measures or circumstances. So in summary, the recommended modifications reduce clarity and guidance for public open space, built form controls on the kiln site, and additional building height criteria. As such, it's considered appropriate for changes to the draft structure plan to be in accordance with Council's resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. That was extremely well timed with your 3 minutes today. Emma Cole speaking to you now. I'll go to members to see if there are any questions. Commissioner Heron.
Thank you, Benjamin. I'm again trying to get my head around the POS issue, and we'll obviously have an opportunity to speak to staff when the item is presented. What is the specific intent that the City sees as requiring that 10% specifically? That is, I understand more so around the LDP linkage. I mean, that the kiln site will have various restrictions in terms of its use based on the heritage requirements. Why is there a specific intent by, or what is the intent behind the City's intention around the 10%?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the kiln site is an important heritage sort of place which our community has significant interest in. So the 10% requirement was aimed at ensuring that we got a significant area of public open space that the community then can also enjoy those structures on site. And so that's why the 10% requirement was included within the structure plan.
Thank you.
Any further questions, members? Commissioner Lakey.
Just on that then, so the 10% that you're looking at is a notional 10% in terms of you're not sure how it will be used or benefit the kilns compared to the green link?
No, there's no firm plan on how that would be planned out. There was an expectation that would be set out through the LDP process. And that's consistent with the memorandum of understanding that more detailed planning would be done through that process.
Members, anything further? Okay, thank you very much, Benjamin and Chantal. We appreciate your deputation today.
Thank you.
The next deputation on the same item is from Timtrify and
Chair, committee members and staff, thanks for the time today. Just move through second slide. If you could, thanks. Thanks. Look, thanks for your time today. Look, the landowner really just wanted us to reaffirm our support for the officer recommendation, but also some background to the site. It's been a long process. This was 7 or 8 years ago, and we did the initial public consultation with other landowners and the public on this site. And it is a unique site in terms of we think is ideally suited to height and density. It's surrounded by 3 major roads. It's a number of sites are vacant, but at the same time, it has great connection to open space in the river. There's public transport routes and a good road network, both to the airport and surrounding areas. So you come across very few sites where you can look at 10 to 15 story buildings as proposed here, where you're over 200 metres away from the nearest resident, you have no overshadowing, and you already have a large amount of traffic travelling on the 3 surrounding roads. So you're taking away the issue of visual amenity, height and traffic, which are usually the 3 major issues that you encounter when you start to look at sites such as this. If you go on slides, one after that. That'd be great, thanks. So lot 60 is located in Darley Street. We've got the opportunity there with the road being cul-de-saced to provide some public open space in association with the roads being closed. It then provides the ability, if the decision is made, to provide that linkage across to the open space area, to the river and to the kilns. And it is a logical spot about halfway through that precinct for some amenity down that street to be a spine road for good pedestrian movement and around that precinct, and a logical spot for the open space. So look, really today was just a presentation to say it has been a long process. Sometimes public consultation from 7 or 8 years ago can be lost in the passage of time. But that consultation did put in place the 10 stories and the 5 additional stories. We don't have any objection to the criteria, whether it's existing or proposed for the additional 5 stories. I think the new criteria probably more aligns with current policy in terms of the 10 principles, and the provision of open space is an identifiable community benefit, which is realistic and people can actually make sense on and see a physical representation. So we have no objection with that criteria, and really just here for any questions. Other than that, we support the officer recommendation.
Thank you very much, Tim. Members, any questions of Tim? Yes, Member Moore.
I'm just wondering if you would be able to respond to the city's concerns about the 10% and just sort of explain that a little.
I can. Look, I think when he is talking about public open space, I think the important component is where it physically is provided is probably the key. Anyone agrees with the figure. It's been around longer than most of us. But I think if there's a physical linkage between this precinct, the kilns and the river, to me would be a logical representation of where that might work best.
So to be clear, your proposal more about the linkage as opposed to the setting for the kiln.
I would say the importance is the physical location of the open space as opposed to 10%, that's fine.
Thank you. Any further questions? Right, thank you very much, Tim.
Next deputation on this item 3 brought the agenda this morning. And the following deputation on item 4.1 on the agenda has also been withdrawn. So moving on to the final deputation, which is on item 3.7 on the agenda, the City of Joondalup Local Planning Policy, Residential Development Amendments to Residential Design Codes. And we're welcoming Catherine Temple, Graham Catchpole and Robert Woods via Zoom this morning. Good morning, City of Joondalup. If you can hear us, can you please accept my request to be promoted to panelist so you may join the meeting? Good morning, Catherine. If you can see and hear us. Oh, there we go.
Morning.
Good morning, Catherine, and welcome to the Statutory Planning Committee meeting this morning. Over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this to work. Okay. Good morning, SPC members, and thank you for the opportunity to make a presentation. Following the release of the amended R codes, the City reviewed its two main local planning policies relating to residential development and consolidated these into a draft single policy. A key emphasis of that process was to align our planning framework as closely as possible with the R codes and to only include provisions within a policy that required an alternative approach, having regard to our local context and character. In doing that, we were cognizant of the feedback that we've received from our community over a number of years, and that's both through the creation of our housing opportunity infill areas and through our local planning strategy review. In respect to the provisions around parking, which the officers have not supported in the report in front of you, I guess the city is a predominantly suburban context, and we have a predominance of curvy linear and cul-de-sac roads, which are not typically suited to accommodate on-street car parking. So a reduced requirement for on-site parking to potentially nil bays, coupled with no requirements for visitor bays in, say, 4 group dwellings or less developments, will increase on-street parking. During community consultation for our strategy, one of the significant concerns that came through again and again was on-street parking that's resulting from development, and residents have expressed concerns that any increase will impact on safety. That's both from vehicles reversing out of driveways and sight lines and those sorts of things, and also for pedestrians, particularly children who are using residential streets. We consider that it's appropriate to try and respond to the concerns of the residents through our local planning framework, and hence why we've proposed the parking provisions as we have presented those in our draft policy. It's also noted that in terms of amenity resulting from on-site parking, the R codes reduce the impact or visual impacts of on-site parking through increased landscaping requirements within the street setback area. So we're quite confident that that can be mitigated through landscaping. In relation to the building height, the intent of our provisions was to limit the R20, R60 dual-coded lots to 2-storey deemed to comply heights. That's the existing requirement for these codes under our housing opportunity areas policy. These areas are in early stages of transition, and they're currently comprised of primarily single and double-storey detached dwellings. The 2-storey height limit will facilitate redevelopment at a higher density that remains respectful to the amenity and streetscape of the existing areas, but it's also consistent with Council's vision for the desired future streetscape within these areas that was set when the HOAs were created. The existing policy has been effective in facilitating redevelopment of an appropriate scale in the HOAs. And it's important to note that any proposals that don't meet a 2-storey deemed to comply can still be considered and assessed on their merits through a design principles assessment. And this does allow flexibility in design where appropriate. And we note that development at 3 stories and above is still achievable in our centres and our 80 coded areas.
Catherine, can I just let you know you're almost a minute over, so I do need you to make your final statement, please.
Yeah, sorry, I'm really sorry. Just very lastly, in relation to solar access and site area, I guess our concern with that is the validity, the deemed provisions reference that a development is taken to comply with the R codes if it complies with the provision of an LDP, a structure plan, or a local planning policy. The deemed provisions don't actually reference scheme provisions, and so the validity of scheme provisions being used to vary the R codes
Friend, sorry, you're just going into a lot of detail and you're now a minute and a half over, so I'm just going to have to stop you there. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks, Emma.
I will go to questions though, so maybe it will come out this way. Are there any questions of Catherine? Yes, go ahead.
And Catherine, I do trust you'll be involved with the R code review that we're currently undertaking. But I am particularly interested in terms of the infill locations, and that's obviously a key point. In relation to the parking, although I can understand in one context, will that be a universally applied? So, for instance, if a site is opposite one of the railway stations or within walking distance, is that got the same level of application? Has there been consideration as to whether it would be limited to those within a cul-de-sac or something like that? Has that been part of the deliberation?
Look, and thank you for the question, and through you, Chair. Look, in preparing the draft policy, I guess we sort of looked at the provisions that exist in our current policy, and they relate to our housing opportunity areas, which don't just relate to areas around train stations. So the position in the draft policy, no, it doesn't necessarily have a bespoke arrangement near train stations. At the moment, we're also going through a review of our local planning strategy in the context of infill housing, and reviewing our existing HOAs and looking at whether there's opportunity for additional areas for infill, whether we need to tweak the current controls that we've got. And part of that process will then also consider whether there's a need for more bespoke provisions that relate to specific areas.
Thank you.
Members, are there any further questions? Thank you very much for your deputation today.
Thanks so much.
So that concludes our verbal deputations for today. We have received 3 written deputations. We have received one in relation to the 11B development application for the proposed motor vehicle showrooms on Morrison Road in Midvale from TL Shepherd, a resident, against the recommendation. And we have received 2 written deputations in relation to the Part 11B development application for Mill Point Road in South Perth, both from residents Michael Grant and separately Nigel Bird, against the recommendation, and those are included in today's agenda. Members, just checking in with you, we have had deputations for some time now. Does anyone need a break before we move to consideration of business? Okay, we'll have a 3-minute break, 5 minutes. Thank you all.
Unashamedly, no. Yeah.
It's a happy.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the SPC meeting. We just had a brief 5-minute break and we're now at item 3, which is the non-confidential items for decision. The first item that we are dealing with today is item 3.1, the Part 11B development application for the proposed motor vehicle sales showroom and workshops at lot 338 Morrison Road in Midvale. And we're joined by Paula De Perna and Rachel Bridges on this item. Morning. Would you like to make any comments in relation to the deputation that you've heard or any other comments before we go to questions?
A few things, if I can.
Thank you.
I suppose in the deputations there was some discussion as to the exercising of discretion for this proposal relative to whether Part A, B, C, or D is being utilised. For clarity, the provisions of 171R are not dependent on meeting all of the criteria. So in making a decision, it would be attributed to a decision being made under A, B, C or D. Each of them have an or in between. You could address more than one criteria, but the minimum would be a decision made under one element of 171R. The department's assessment in categorising which criteria was applied was informed on a number of matters. One is that discretion was being sought relative to a prohibited use. The prohibition of the use of itself was not considered minor. That went into consideration as to what the term minor is defined as. And whilst it's not expressed in the report, the consideration was given to the Macquarie definition of minor, and as it was earlier stated for another matter, is lesser as in size, extent, importance, or as a lesser of the two. In this case, notwithstanding other decisions that the committee has made in regards to prohibited uses, it was not considered minor in the context of this proposal, and therefore the attribution to B was assigned. Consideration was given to the committee's earlier decisions or previous decisions under Part 17 when dealing with a use that was not permitted. And for consistency under the principles of orderly and proper planning, we applied the B in a consistent fashion. In terms of the definition of the activity or the land use, there was a question as to whether or not what the use class definition would be, and it would be motor vehicle, boat or caravan sales as outlined within the report, which means that premises wherein motor vehicles, boats or caravans are kept, exposed or offered for sale or hire. In this instance, the application form did specify motor vehicle sales showroom, and in informing the assessment, the definition was, this was the definition that was applied, noting that the report does only refer to motor vehicle sales in terms of within the recommendation. Overall, the commentary with regards to condition 3B, the inclusion of the review of the colour schedule was twofold. One, through the design review process, concerns were expressed as to the colour selections for the buildings and noting their heat impact. And so that was derived from the SDRP advice. That coupled with the objectives of the scheme in the absence of objectives of the zone were considered, and it was considered appropriate to include a review of the colour schedule to moderate it given its natural location. Take any questions beyond that.
Thank you very much. Members, over to you for any questions. Yes, Commissioner Herron.
Thank you. And Paola, first of all, on the issue of land use, further to my question to the proponent, and fully accepting that the intention is to limit it to car vehicles, being Mazda, but being mindful also about the basic zoning and current provisions. And if Mazda were to withdraw and there being functional use of that site, do you see benefit in amending condition 5 to explicitly broaden it out? Or do you see that as having, like, if Mazda were to withdraw and another proponent were to come in that may be dealing with boats or caravans, how would that be dealt with, and would there be benefit in amending that condition?
Through the chair, the assessment assumed motor vehicles, given that that was applied for. Whilst the definition does allow for other activities, the scale of those other types of vehicles may present a bit of an issue, and the intensity and location may need to be moderated in that potentially more landscaping may be required in that event. However, given the technical definition includes both boat or caravan sales, it would be open to the committee to include that reference in condition 5.
Thank you. And through the chair, just I suppose further to that, I'm being mindful that going through 11B requires obviously certain thresholds to be met. A change in use would not meet the fiscal threshold. How would that therefore be going through the 11B, given that you can't go through a City of Swan process?
Through the chair, it may constitute as an amendment to the existing approval, depending on the nature and extent of that modification. It would be open for a new application to be lodged and considered on its merits. If a land use, if the building was completed, constructed and operational, and then someone else wanted to come in and move it at that point, it would be bound by the special use provisions or the permissibilities under the special use. Otherwise, through the Part 11B pathway as an alternative, should it be deemed appropriate in that instance.
Thank you. And if I may, through the chair, in terms of the previous application to amend the zoning of the site, which, as I understand it, did receive an officer report but was not supported by the city. Other than traffic, were there any other substantive bases which the city did not support that amendment?
Through the chair, as I understand, the primary reason for which the scheme amendment was not initiated was concerns by the council relative to traffic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? Yes, Member Franklin.
Hi, thank you. In regards to the scope of uses and the definition of uses, would it be hopeful in the long term that the scheme would review the scope of uses under the special use zone as part of their scheme review process? Would it not be beneficial to have a standard land use definition rather than a bespoke one for that purpose?
Through the chair, it would assist from a more longer term perspective. It's unclear, given that the city has initiated the scheme review process, what may occur on this site more longer term, and what may inform that more broadly at this stage. I suppose the scope of this application would be to consider the permissibility based on what's before us.
Members, any further questions? Oh, sorry, Commissioner O'Dea, have your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. You were asking if there were further, and I did put my hand up, so you didn't miss me. Thank you. Paola, given that the discretion is really being sought on that due to the age of the scheme, looking at the surrounding land uses and the proximity to Great Eastern Highway, etc., this is you may not be able to answer this, but do you consider that if a new scheme was done now or a scheme review, that this is a land use that would likely be considered by the City of Swan in this location, given the surrounding land uses? I know you can't probably answer that.
I don't feel that an answer can be provided. Zoning would involve quite a considerable amount of investigation. The land currently is unzoned and only has a special use zone with specified and it's somewhat historic. It does go back quite some time as to the land use or the uses nominated. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't feel that it would be appropriate for me to comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, members? Okay, then we'll move to consideration of the item. If I could please see if there is a mover and seconder of the recommendation before us. Mover for the item. Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Herron, seconded by Commissioner Lakey. Do you wish to speak to the item, Commissioner Herron?
Yes. And I will be overt in saying that this was one that required significant reflection. I understand and accept all the items included in the report. It didn't, it is one of the shades of grey that I often refer to. And although I attempted to, I could not find the basis on which those original uses were identified in terms of what that underlying objective was, which does present certain challenges. That being said, it then came down to, okay, is there strategic alignment? And that was a little bit a stretch of the bow, let's say, in terms of obviously being a bulky goods component. That being said, I did, upon review of the council report of the previous amendment, did note that that there was a planning basis to it and that there was support from the officers. The issue of traffic, which was identified, I'm very comfortable does not warrant, does not form a basis on which the proposal should be refused. And therefore, I then considered what is the impact of the amenity in the locality. And given the nature and scale of the proposal that is being put forward, I did not see that the nature and form was such that it would have undue impact on particularly the residential locality in which it was located. So based on those somewhat unique components, I have decided to support the application.
Thank you, Commissioner Herron. Commissioner Lakey, would you like to make any comments?
Really just echo Commissioner Herron's point of view. It's not a clear one, but on balance, I think for me, the fact that the officers supported this from a technical assessment, I think this can provide amenity to that area that will support the neighbourhood centre. And on balance, I think I'm happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other comments from any members? Commissioner Adair.
Thanks, Chair. I'm actually not going to support this application. I have no problem with the assessment that's been undertaken. I think it's a thorough and appropriate assessment, and it's definitely something that we can consider. However, I do know the area well, and I don't personally feel that there is a strategic alignment in this application with that location. And for me, it's a step too far as creep of land use. The applicant's own planners confirmed that this is not a complementary use to the location, would not normally be situated here. So I think that says quite a lot when their own planners make that kind of statement. I do acknowledge the age of the scheme and the lack of zoning on this site, but I'm not convinced that an updated scheme would have included car sales or motor vehicle sales or any kind of sales in this location due to the proximity of Great Eastern Highway and also the surrounding uses. I mean, it's clearly identified that they want to have this more of a neighbourhood type centre, and for me, it is not complementary to the neighbourhood centre that is already there. It's far from it. So I don't find it a compelling argument that the discretion being sought should be supported in this instance, and I won't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Any further comments from members? I'm happy to speak to the item. Look, I think just like to say thank you, Paola, for your words in relation to the additional discretion and the outline of why it hasn't been treated as minor. Just want to acknowledge the comment around minor not being utilised as part of the pathway because it hasn't been used before. I think clearly that's incorrect because our next item is utilising that additional discretion. So I just wanted to make that point. Look, I think in relation to some of the feedback that's come through from the consultation, obviously this is really proximate on the doorstep of the Swan Active Midland Complex, and there was comments coming through from community about how they would like to see this used for recreation, and you can understand when looking at it that that would make sense, but we do need to acknowledge that this is a private land holding and that the special use zone already permits a very vast range of uses, and I take the point from the applicant's representative that they are not necessarily consistent, that it does permit car wash and service station already, and that scale and intensity and the design of this showroom is not, it is within the sort of context of some of these uses that have already been permitted or discretionary under the scheme. It's probably also important to note that the LD development approved on the site in terms of the traffic impact, I take the point that that was almost double in terms of vehicles per day. And when you look back to the reasons for not accepting the scheme amendment by the council of City of Swan, they did really rely heavily on traffic. In fact, they said that it has the potential to conflict with traffic using Grey Drive to access the Swan Active recreational facilities. But I think the TIA has shown that this is actually not going to present that conflict, and in fact is a much lesser impact than the previously approved shopping centre. I think this has had the benefit of design review that's come clearly in the final designs. The fact that its site coverage is 26.7%, being on that larger lot, does provide additional space for landscape, and I think the bulk of the parking being screened by the buildings is also of benefit to the street. So whilst it doesn't necessarily appear to be a land use that is in absolute harmony with the recreational uses around it, I think that these special use provisions already envisage quite a diverse and, as put, not consistent land uses on this lot. And I can't see that that would be grounds for refusal, given that that is, in my view, in keeping with some of the uses already that are discretionary for this site. So I'm happy to support the recommendation. Are there any further comments? We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Thank you, Commissioner Adair. We'll record your dissenting vote. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is 3.2, Part 11B development application for the demolition of existing multiple dwelling development and construction of proposed multiple dwellings at 44 and 48 Mill Point Road in South Perth. And we're joined by Paola De Perna and Jackie German on this one. Thank you very much. Paola and Jackie, do you have any comments in relation to the deputation that you've heard today?
Chair, just wanting to clarify the calculation methodology for the community benefit. It was touched on in the deputation relative to the process or how it would be calculated. The scheme itself, with the South Perth activity plan, does set out quite a clear calculation methodology. In this instance, the community benefit guide also allows for split contributions comprising both of on-site works and a monetary payment to meet the total contribution requirement. So there is a mechanism to facilitate that split contribution both on-site and in a cash in lieu kind of fashion. In the context of this application, there was through a recommended condition, a cap set on what the on-site contribution would be, so that it would not it would be fair and equitable in terms of the outcomes and intent of the community benefit contributions being, the intent of the community benefit contributions under the framework. In terms of view corridors and concerns about height and floor plate, the report sets out detailed assessment in relation to all those components. The view corridors have been extensively considered, and as was touched on in the deputation, a factor that was explored through the design review process. The planning assessment also considered the city's local planning policy framework in relation to view corridors and the intention of the view corridors in the precinct plan, in particular as to how heights and the footprint would facilitate view corridors, in particularly across the site rather than along Mill Point Road. Happy to take any other questions.
Thank you, Paola. Members, over to you for any questions. Member Harmon?
Just a minor one. There's obviously, the applicants made a request for some changes to a lot of the wording to a few conditions. And I guess the theme is consistent that they appear to be trying to build in some flexibility between what is approved in the DA and what evolves through the detailed design. Are you comfortable that there's an inherent degree of flexibility within reason built into the conditions as they are to get to that point without having to come back for an amendment for something that is otherwise fairly minor?
Through the chair, there were some additional, the department's response to those conditions have been circulated. There are a couple of edits that could be made to clarify that flexibility. The importance through the conditions is, whilst there is flexibility afforded, anything significant would of itself capture the need for an amendment in any case. In some instances, the design and construct process at times could diminish the output, and given the extent of the quality of the development being presented in this case, and more specifically the need to maintain design excellence, it's important that there's sufficient certainty in the conditions as to what is being delivered, rather than providing a sense of discretional flexibility post-determination.
So, Paola, just for clarity, the only one that you have partially agreed with is in relation to 13.
It's the second part to condition 13.
And the rest you have disagreed.
There was a correction to a date.
31 July.
31 July.
All right. Thank you. Any further questions for Paola or Jackie? Right, thank you very much. We'll move to consideration of the item. Can I please call on a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by Commissioner Herron, seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Thank you. Commissioner Herron, make any comment?
Yes, and can I request that in moving that we include that amendment to the date in condition 13. So as per the response received from officers.
Thank you. Can I just check with the seconder? Yes, thank you. That's seconded.
This was, I suppose, one where I think the design response, I think we can all agree that the design response has been very positive. The key issues in my mind in relation to this particular application did relate to the consideration of the extended consideration that's given to the watercourse site and the weight that is applied to that. I do think it's quite clear that we can't consider it to be part of the site unless they actually acquire it. So in that basis, that's put to one side. However, things like intrusions into setbacks are very logical to include, because the basis that the whole notion of setbacks is about impact to adjoining properties. And I haven't dealt with a situation where a sewer pump station had an issue with privacy. The other component then is around the floor plate component. And although, as I sort of say, you cannot consider it as if it was the Watercorp site was part of the site. I do think it does bear consideration in terms of the overall form of the development. I do consider that the key issue around the floor plates is around the view corridor components, and I have taken on board the consideration that in that design response, that the modification to the floor plates would not have any substantive impact on the view corridor implications. With that in mind, and given the design quality that's been applied, I do think that there is community benefit in the enhancements to the pump station site. I do see that having integration of public art, which is going to have both aesthetic value and identity attached to it, is ultimately a positive outcome. I do feel that the extent of benefit can be open to some debate and discussion. There is clearly mutual benefit there, but ultimately, on balance, I support the recommendation as is presented here today.
Thank you, Commissioner Herron. Commissioner Brooks, do you wish to make any comments?
Only to say that I agree with Commissioner Herron's comments, and specifically in relation to the community benefit, I do see that this proposal gives the opportunity to upgrade and enhance what is essentially a piece of legacy public infrastructure that is a bit of a blight, and I think that is a significant improvement to the streetscape, and that's why I'm comfortable with the level of discretion that's requested.
Thank you, Commissioner Brooks. Are there any further comments? Yes, Member Moore.
This one I struggled with. I have less issues with the issue about the community benefits, and I note that it is a well-designed building. I don't have any issues with that. My struggle here, and I think I'm not supporting the proposal. I don't see how we can approve it under section 171R as a minor conflict of a minor nature. I've got real concerns about that, given the non-compliance with a very relatively recent and current planning document, the South Perth Activity Centre plan in particular, which is asking for 20% of single bedrooms, and I don't think there is a sufficient argument as why there's a lack of housing diversity in this particular. They can still be, we note they're not affordable dwellings in any way, but they can still have a housing diversity component. And my other concern is the increase from the 40% to 46.5% gross floor area. I don't see how that can be considered minor. So I don't think I can support this particular proposal in this form. But noting that it is a very well-designed building, I don't have any issues with that. I would say in regards to the conditions that have been asked to be modified, I would say, and I know that Al has already said this, but the design excellence was given by the SDRP on the basis of landscape quality, sustainability and aesthetics. And you would want to make sure that it is a top quality building with no changes being built in that in the cost of construction. I would have real concerns about change, if it is approved, changing those conditions.
Well, that's for another day, but yes, agreed. Any further comments? Yeah, look, just a couple from me. I think it's important to note that this development has unlocked some of the tier 1 provisions under the activity centre plan through achieving things like community benefit, which I think has been well fleshed out, and I'm satisfied with the way that that has been met, and also design excellence. I think that's been illustrated through the presentation that we've received today from the applicant team as well. On the minor variation, I am inclined to accept that. I think that that has been discussed in some detail in the report. It's been addressed by Ben Doyle today in some detail, and I think that I'm satisfied that when you consider the gross floor plate area in the context of that 4.6%, but not exceeding in height or plot ratio, we've talked through the fact that it's not affecting the view corridors, etc. I do see that as not having a significant impact for the development, and accept that as a minor variation. And I do see the benefit in the works to the Watercorp site, noting that there is that ongoing commitment and licensing arrangement for maintenance in perpetuity there. And also just to note on this one, it has received quite strong community support, which with developments of this scale, we don't often see. So I thought that was also worth mentioning, that this has been well received through community consultation. Are there any further comments? Is there any dissent? Thank you, Member Moore. We'll record your dissent in the minutes. That is carried. Thank you. Okay, the next item is 3.3, the development application for the multi-storey car park at Wolf Way in Murdoch. And we are joined by Sanderson and Catherine Beamish on this item. Thank you, Dale and Catherine, for being here. Are there any comments that you wish to make before questions?
Just a couple, thank you.
Just to address some of the questions that were raised the applicant deputation. Regarding the landscaping, it is the actual car park itself does take up quite a significant portion of the site, leaving a lot of space for landscaping. To address that, the applicant has included the road reserves in the application, and so most of the landscaping is going into that area. The City of Melville, that will be subject to the City of Melville and also Gawa. Basically, there's a condition requiring a detailed landscaping plan, because the amount of landscaping detail that it's been submitted with the application isn't really enough for a detailed landscaping plan. So there's a recommended condition requiring the landscaping to be detailed and submitted to the satisfaction of the WAPC on advice from Gawa. Also, in those road reserves, there will be footpaths in the public realm to be integrated around the landscaping as well. And in terms of the question regarding the future adaptability, I don't believe the car park has been designed with that in mind. I think that the staff car parking will probably be required on an ongoing basis, so that hasn't been taken into consideration.
Okay, members, over to you for any questions. Yes, Commissioner Herron.
Thank you very much for that. I did obviously try to get from the applicant some detail, because yes, the on the landscape side, I suppose what I'm trying to, and I appreciate that obviously the nature of the building means that there's not going to be a lot of on-site landscaping, but I'm just mindful in terms of then what is going into the street, and that again, it not be petunias. This is not about making it pretty. This is about breaking up the bulk and scale. So you're comfortable that the condition as is currently articulated provides sufficient certainty that that will be undertaken, and the responsibility for maintenance, I'm assuming, would be taken up by the City of Melville. Is that correct?
That's a good question. I mean, it is to be, there's a condition that it's to be implemented and maintained on an ongoing basis. I mean, it's under this application, so yeah, I guess the implementation of it and then the ongoing basis is probably the City of Melbourne, given it's in their road reserve. Yeah. There are 2 trees, mature trees on Winch Way, that they are retaining in the central median strip. So yeah, and yeah, we are looking for, I think the sort of conceptual landscape plan they provided does have some other mature trees in it.
Thank you. And through the chair, and yeah, the point about adaptability, I know that there's no requirement as such. I'm just mindful that particularly with large parking facilities, that if we think about the lifetime and particularly embedded energy and things like that, I think the notion of just bowling things over going forward is going to become increasingly restricted. Sorry, yes. Pardon me. Yes, so just confirming that in terms of what you've looked at is in terms of floor plate heights and things like that, that it's not currently integrated. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, can I please call on a mover and seconder for the item? Thank you, Member Knight, and seconded by Member Harmon.
Thank you. We've had a discussion. This is obviously an essential piece of infrastructure that's required on the website. If you understand staff parking and the future women and babies hospitals.
Thank you very much. Member Harmon, any comment?
No, just to echo that, it's obviously a critical piece of infrastructure to go with the hospital. The design, obviously, there's go with what you can do with a car park of this scale, but what was built with the car park at Perth Children's Hospital presents quite well to the street, and this is quite similar in design. So, what's being proposed?
Okay, members, any further comments? I'll put the item. Is there any dissent? Thank you all. That's carried. Now, next item 3.4, the development application for the proposed public jetty at Port Kennedy. And on this item, Commissioner Lakey, thank you. And we are joined by Cale, Aidan and Sam on this item. And we do have an alternate recommendation with the deletion of condition 3. So you could just, I know we had a briefing on this, but if you could just mention the condition 3, the reason for public record why that's been removed.
Through the chair, we recommended the deletion of conditions based on some updated information received after the report.
That information that you received was?
Sorry, we received additional technical information from the Department of Transport and Major Infrastructure. They were the ones who had requested the condition be imposed in the first place. The advice indicated or acknowledged that a number of the matters they sought to have addressed had already been addressed through other processes or did not relate to the scope of works part of this application.
Thank you. Did you want to make any comment before I go to further questions?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. With regards to condition 4, 5 and 6, raised in the deputation, conditions have been through a rigorous internal review. The officers are comfortable represent standard approach to matters. While the applicant's comments are noted, we're of the view that the current wording facilitates the input and technical expertise of the appropriate agencies, but WAPC retains the ability to clear the conditions and resolve disputes if they arise.
I did wonder about that, whether it was due to the nature of it being in reserved areas. What the applicants highlighted that they don't see that as a standard way of approaching specification by a qualified consultant as opposed to through other local government or government entity. Was that linked to it being in the reserved specifically? Okay. Further to add? No? Okay. Members, over to you for questions. Yes, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you, through the chair. Just wanting to, and I know that there is no need to obviously have a condition, but for clarity, should we or can we include an advice note that obviously that development cannot occur until licensing has been issued and a party responsible. Oh, sorry.
I've had a response in the questions to members.
Sorry, thank you.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Just noting that that question was responded to in advance of the meeting, just for everyone's information. It did like.
No worries.
Are there any other questions on the item? Can I please have a mover and seconder for the item? Moved by Member Franklin, seconded by Member Harmon. Member Franklin, do you wish to speak to the item?
Only in that this proposal is in effect to previous agreements to actually construct a jetty as part of an agreement, facilitate that agreement.
Okay, Member Harmon, any?
No.
Okay. Anyone wish to make any comment? Yes, Commissioner Adair.
Thanks, Chair. In short, my only concern with this is about the long-term maintenance and commitment to this. However, that's not our consideration today. So I did want to just raise that is a concern, and that the fact that they need to get licenses, etc. It seems a little bit premature. However, I'll consider it on its merits.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Any further comment? Just from me, I think it's obviously useful that the applicant understands that they know that this is development application and potential approval subject to where we get to today, and that they will not be able to construct without getting those additional approvals. So the fact that that's been acknowledged by the applicant today, I think, is important. Is there any further comment? Any dissent to the recommendation? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. We're now at item 3.5, the standard structure plan for the Wandie North local structure plan amendment number 9. Member Harmon has left the room for this one, and we're joined by Cale Luxton, Aidan O'Brien and David Sands. Thank you for joining us. Would you like to make any comment before we go to questions?
Thank you, Chair. I think the officer assessment that's before you adequately covers the issues related to this amendment, and we have nothing further to add at this time.
Okay, thank you, members. Any questions on this item?
Sorry, through the chair, and again, further to the question I put to the proponents in relation to the LDP, just wanting to confirm that there is clarity between all parties as to the intent of the LDP, particularly in relation to the interface to Line Road.
Thank you, Commissioner Heron. The matter has been discussed at some length with the proponent, and there is a common understanding about the purpose of the LDP and the requirement that one be prepared through the subdivision process.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Just in terms of the tree retention and the commentary in the report, we've heard today from the applicant that they have given that quite considered review and looked at all options. Are you satisfied that that is the case?
Chair, I am satisfied that the applicant has worked through the issues surrounding the retention of vegetation to the degree possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any further questions? We'll move to a mover and seconder, please. Thank you. Commissioner Heron is moving, seconded by Commissioner Lakey. Thank you. Would you like to speak to the item?
No, nothing further.
Commissioner Lakey, any comment? Any members? Okay, thank you. I think the deputation was incredibly helpful in working through the tree retention issue. So I'm satisfied with the outcome that's been reached. Any dissent to this item? No, thank you very much. It's carried.
Get out.
Turn it off. This side of the room.
Yeah, it's freezing.
Seems to have just escalated, maybe with some people leaving the room.
Yeah, the hot air has reduced.
Anyway, from time to time. lightens the load. Anyway, item 3.6, a standard structure plan for the Golden Gateway local structure plan. We are joined by Dale Sanderson and Jamie Townsend on this one. We have had 2 deputations. We've heard from the City of Belmont and also one of the applicants in relation to this. Dale and Jamie, is there anything that you would like to speak to in response? I'd suggest the POS versus the Greenway would be a good one to address, and anything else that's come out in terms of advertising as well.
Yes, thank you. Just a bit of background. This structure plan's a lot of years in the making. It's been advertised twice. The LDP for the Kiln site has also been advertised. So there's been 3 public processes, particularly over the Kiln site. Our view is re-advertising, the 3rd round of re-advertising is not necessary. It's just going to extend a very long process. In relation to the LDP itself, our view is that it's not necessary to have an LDP on top of, in addition to the structure plan. It's an extra layer. Community's already provided comment, and the LDP also has no WAPC oversight, even though it has height and density controls in it. In relation to the history of the LDP, it was never finalised. The city and it was advertised. Post advertising, the city proposed to reduce height from 8 stories to 5 stories. Because of that, if the LDP wasn't finalised, that wasn't seen as at that time as a feasible redevelopment scenario for that site. And I guess that's from the landowner point of view. From our point of view, given the only part of the site can be developed, 5 stories is not considered an appropriate outcome for the site. Jamie was going to cover a couple of other points.
Yeah, so in terms of the Ascot Kilns mods, the proposed modification is to include a 10% POS requirement, but this is tied to density bonus to allow the 8 stories to occur, which is consistent with the approach that we've taken for the whole structure plan area. The mods also include a set of objectives and design principles to guide the quantity and design of the public open space. We have recommended that the structure plan map designate an area of POS to the southern end of the site to acknowledge the benefit of providing a link to the POS at the end of Daly Street and the Belmont Trust land to the east. And it's, I guess, further that any future development would require the support of the Heritage Council, would need to go through a design review process. And it's noted that as the WAPC are the landowner, it will still need to determine the appropriate end manager for the site to ensure the ongoing management and maintenance of the heritage assets.
Thank you both. That's very helpful. Members, any questions? Yes, Member Moore.
I'm just wondering if you could just clarify the Ascot Kiln site. I think I didn't quite pick it up when I was reading it. I'm slightly confused, or I would like to be comforted that the heritage significance of that site is protected. And I'm just noting the concerns of the city as well. Can you sort of elaborate as to how the process is going to work? And I know you've said that the Heritage Council will be consulted at some point in the future, but making these changes, has that been discussed with the Heritage DPLH? Has there been any heritage advice applied at this point in time?
Yeah, we've consulted internally with our Heritage Division.
I quite hear.
So we have consulted with the Heritage Division as well as the Property Division, and they provided input into the high-level objectives and design criteria that we've recommended. And they fully support the approach that we've taken.
And so there was no issues in terms of the provision of the public open space and the changes that the city's concerned about.
And it's important to note that the structure plan includes no requirements for Ascot Kiln site. It just refers to the LDP, and for the LDP to require a 10% POS contribution, which I think has been discussed. The actual quantity is probably less significant. It's more the quality and how you use the POS in relation to the heritage site, and to ensure that it's protection and that we ensure that the public access is maintained. It's
still currently owned by the commission, we've still got the ability to manage that.
Okay, and you don't have any concerns about the impact of future built form?
We've recommended an appropriate density coding that has sufficient setbacks, and it reflects the vision of the previous LDP. So there's no changes to what we're proposing in relation to what the LDP was proposing in terms of heights and setbacks.
Thank you.
Very useful clarifications. Thank you both. Are there any further questions? Yes, Commissioner Heron.
Yes, thank you. And I suppose further to that, my interpretation or understanding from some of the questions that were posed by the city related to public access to the kilns, whether they are designated as open space or not, I think is somewhat secondary. But I'm wanting clarification that the heritage controls in themselves will ensure that there needs to be some ongoing public aspect and visibility / accessibility to those kilns going forward. That is, they can't just be built around and cordoned off. Is that a fair assumption?
We have included high-level design principles and objectives that touch on that, and we're confident that those will guide the future development and will protect those sightlines and public access.
Thank you.
Just sorry, to supplement that, most of the actual assets on the site have street frontage, so there's absolutely no chance of them being totally built around. I'm not exactly sure what access is available at the moment, but it is fenced to 1.8 high at the moment all around the site, so I'm not sure there is actually access.
Thank you. And
anything that happens should only build on them.
Yeah, sorry, and thank you. Through the chair, I suppose that was why I sort of said visibility as opposed to necessarily, because again, I wouldn't expect that the city would necessarily want to have it as a publicly accessible open space that they are responsible for managing and maintaining, particularly given certain components attached to it. But I think that it's more about the fact that it would be publicly visible, and therefore that there is some level of community, if you like, interaction.
Yes, the kilns face the street, and the chimneys are very large, and they are all sort of street facing, and they're sort of at opposite ends of the area. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, members? If I could call on a mover and seconder for the item. Anyone who hasn't had it go today is very welcome to put their hand up. Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Second's moving, seconded by Member Moore. Commissioner Adair, any comments? Sharing?
No, I've got nothing. I've got nothing to add.
Thank you. Okay, any comments? I just want to say it's very exciting to see this move along. It's a fantastic opportunity for some urban infill, and for that real enjoyment of the Ascot kiln sites. I think we've been waiting for this for a long time, so really excited to see this progression, and fully support things like transitioning this across to a PSP, and acknowledge that those 3 public processes have already been undertaken. I think it's important just to note that in the context of the City of Belmont raising that question around why not re-advertise. So thank you.
Thank you. If I may, through the chair, again, to reiterate that, I think that it is important to state that we have given consideration to the request by the City of Belmont, and that I think they, upon consideration, I'm satisfied that the processes have been suitably undertaken and have been subject to sufficient scrutiny that the process can be proceeded with confidence.
Thank you. Any further comments? Is there any dissent to the recommendation? Thank you. That is carried. Morning. Well, it's still morning. Okay, so we are now at item 3.7, which is the City of Joondalup Local Planning Policy Residential Development Amendments to the Residential Design Codes. And we have had a deputation today from Catherine from the City of Joondalup, Catherine Temple. Any comments in response to what you've heard today or additional information?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly to acknowledge that the City is seeking to respond to community concerns and that the policy provisions relate primarily to areas that are in early transition. And to clarify that we were, of course, aware of the City's views on these matters, and that has been considered in the assessment and the report in front of you today.
Thank you very much, members. Questions on the item? Yes, Commissioner Heron.
Thank you. I'm just wanting to be mindful, and as you say, like this obviously relates to some specific elements. I'm trying to think how do I frame this appropriately. Some of the concerns I understand, and particularly in the suburban context, has there been consideration as to, for instance, on the parking component, whether there would be a scale or a sliding scale type scenario that could be considered where, for instance, in a cul-de-sac environment, that it may be appropriate to require additional parking because of the lack of feasible on-street parking. Was that considered as part of the assessment process?
That was not a solution that was put forward to us. I think as the City raised in the presentation, I think some more fine solutions might be considered through its review of its local planning strategy, and understand that's ongoing at the moment.
Thank you. Through the Chair, the other one being, and I think this does represent the challenge of the curvilinear environments and where they're having increased density. Would it be fair to assume that going forward, and in a similar context going forward, that just simple rezoning might not be the most appropriate mechanism to deal with the infill areas, and therefore other vehicles might be considered going forward if that was be proposed again?
I believe policy as a whole was originally developed as part of a package to ensure residential development was going to sit sensitively into its landscape. I think what's in front of us today sort of represents a consolidation of a lot of those more broad variations to the residential design codes. In terms of parking, there was previously no variation in policy framework. What has happened since the previous policies were implemented is that the new R codes now have lower parking requirements than was in place before 2024. So I think this would be the first stage that it has been looked at as something that might require WAPC approval.
Thank you. And finally, just in relation to specifically the clause 2.3 of Part C, which is the parking, if that were to be, I'm trying to figure out, if that were to be included, does that then become mandated on all sites, or does it purely give council the discretion to consider the requirement for additional parking?
That would require, so that would increase the minimum parking requirements for all development in housing opportunity areas to the higher density code. So the base density code of R20, if development exceeds under that, it is subject to the normal codes requirements. Otherwise, anything to the higher code would have to meet increased parking standard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, members? Yes, Member Moore.
I was going to say questions as Member Heron, Councillor Heron, but thank you for covering those. I'm just wondering about the heights, seeing the 2-storey and 3-storey transitions. Can you just give us a little commentary on that and your view there?
So we understand that building height has been a key concern for the community in previous consultation processes. It was not raised in submissions given on this policy, though that might be expected given there was no change proposed to the building height limits. This is the first time the Commission is being asked to look at building heights. Previously, a variation did not require the WAPC's approval. The view that we have formed in the recommendation before you is that a building height limit, we do not believe it is warranted as proposed. I think primarily because it affects land that is in very well located areas surrounding train stations and activity centres.
So there was reference to it just being applied to deemed to comply rather than the other. So Was that correct?
Yeah, so the city or decision makers rather would be able to consider variations to the building height standards. I think there have been cases, for example, in the attachment to the report, which looks at existing 3-storey developments in the area where, for example, the Commission has approved 3-storey development. So that is a possibility. So we would generally understand that a policy might set out a position that the government would tend to be consistent with. But certainly it is open to decision makers to consider variations where it's consistent with design principles.
Any further questions? If I could have a mover and seconder for this item, please. Commissioner Brooks is moving and Commissioner Knight seconding. To make any comment?
No, just to say that I'm happy with the officer's report. I think the provisions are reasonable and the excluded provisions, there are reasonable grounds to exclude.
Commissioner Knight, any discussion? Member Moore?
I just wonder if it's worth some discussion on the parking, because understanding those housing opportunity areas and having had experience in that, that is a significant, well, I'm in two minds, because I can see how it is somewhat different to some of the other, it does look like what I'm trying to say is it looks like a localised issue, which is what we're allowed to consider. So I'm just wondering if there was any other thought about that from any of the other members, that in particular circumstances there could be that extra requirement. So I really have great sympathy for the city's position on the parking in particular. I'm less worried about the height, building heights. I think that could be addressed. But I'm just wondering if there was any other discussion that any other about the parking in those particular areas, particularly with those curved streets. I've seen how that can really be challenging for any infill development if you're not required to look at on-site parking requirements. And given that everything's changed quite dramatically since those housing opportunity areas were implemented, do you share the city's concerns with that?
If I may, through the chair, I mean, essentially that's where part of my concern lied, was that having seen some of the issues in some of those areas at the moment, prior to the reduction that has already occurred, and although I'm definitely not an advocate for more parking, I'm also mindful that if we are going to enable infill in some of these areas, we also need to be sure that we are enabling it to happen with the least impact on the functionality and amenity that is in those areas. I'm similarly less concerned about the building height component, and that the clause 2.3 of Part C is one that, yes, I would personally like to see incorporated, but I'm also not so fixed on it that I would await the views of others.
I'm happy to speak to it. I think that it's really incumbent on the City of Joondalup to really be very specific about where the issues are. They really do need to demonstrate how the locality is, the characteristics of the locality is so different as to warrant this variation. And I'd say that through large swathes of our suburban Perth metropolitan area, we would have similar situations where you're characterised by cul-de-sacs, where, and they haven't specifically mentioned that it's been sort of presented as an anecdotal example, but it hasn't specifically gone to that issue of cul-de-sac. So I think that if they do want to explore this, I think they really need to be a lot more specific about how the characteristics of their neighbourhoods within that 800 metres of a train station, like it's in the activity centre area, there's train station catchment areas, the high frequency bus route catchment areas. I do think we need to be very mindful of anything that we do here for Joondalup could then see replications across other local government areas in this location. I think that if we do think there are potential issues with, this is something that perhaps could be discussed through the R code review, but I don't know that City of Joondalup has made a very specific localised case for this, and I think that they would be very much incumbent upon them to do that, to sway me to make a variation to the R codes in this way. Commissioner Adair?
Well, thanks, Chair. I'm pleased that you said that because the parking has been, I concur with what Rebecca and Ray have both said. It was the one thing that did concern me about this. And, Catherine's a very good advocate for the city, albeit there was a lot to say. And she did talk about this, but I agree with you that it's not actually localised just to Joondalup. And it probably is a better thing to have in the R codes review than just a variation for Joondalup. I think it's something that needs to be considered on a broader scale. So I'll support the recommendation as it is.
Franklin?
Yeah, I'm also mindful that the city is going through a review of its local planning framework, its strategy and housing, which might actually inform a more detailed response in this respect, which would also be concurrent with any review in the R codes forum as well. So I think it's perhaps a bit preemptive at this point to be adopting this in its present form.
Anyone else want to comment? Megan, sorry, Commissioner Day, your hand is up. Is that from the last time? Yep, okay. All right. Any other commentary in relation to the aspects? Okay, I think we're ready to deal with it then, and no amendments coming forward?
No.
Okay, all right. So is there any dissent to the recommendation? Thank you, that is carried. It was a good discussion. Thank you very much for raising that, Member Moore. We now need to move to our confidential item for today's meeting. So I would like to ask for a mover and seconder to close the meeting to members of the public so that we can continue with our confidential item. Moved by Member Franklin, seconded by Member Moore. Oh, you could have moved.